Now, I want to now lead into the word culture wars, because when I first began in radio, the culture wars were everywhere, and these were big discussion topics. I'm going to read you some of these discussion topics from the 10 years ago or 15 years ago and ask you what happened to the culture wars. Abortion, animal rights, bilingual education, creation, evolution, family values, death penalty, drugs, flag burning, feminism, gun politics, law and order, media bias in the U.S., moral absolutism versus moral relativism, multiculturalism, permissivism, political correctness, euthanasia, secularism and secularization, the so-called separation of church and state, sexual education, stem cell research. Every one of those words has triggered a thought in your mind. Each one is a sort of explosive device. And yet, do you hear anyone discussing 99% of those topics anymore? Now, you wouldn't expect it to be discussed by anyone on the left because they've won on virtually every one of those points. I can go right down the list. It's as though the culture wars are over and the radical communist left has won. So what is left for them to do? If they've won on the culture war front, what's left but to take away your dignity? And then after they take away your dignity and they take away your guns, they will take you away and put you into a re-education camp, as has been done by every Marxist revolution in the history of this sad earth. That's what's coming unless you start to understand what's at stake. Unless you stand up and fight back against these evil degenerates. Make no mistake about it, it's not just simply a choice between one way of looking at things and another, just a different lifestyle, just a different opinion. No, they're going after your dignity, then your guns, and then your freedom. That's exactly all I have left to take down. They've done everything else. They've debased virtually everything else that was worth holding on to in this society. They've beaten you on every level. I put up the good fight. I fought the good fight. When my day comes that I have to leave the earth, if I have a moment to think about it, I'll say, well, at least I fought the degenerate Bolsheviks with everything I had. I gave it everything I could. I threw everything I could at the enemy. Now you say, well, okay, you've done very well doing it. I did very well doing it. But it ain't over yet. I've also paid a very high price, and I don't want to sit here and cry to you. That's my problem. I took on a government, and I lost. Do you understand that? I took on a government, and I lost. The evil British government, the phony, fake, conservative British government under whatever his name is, who came along and promised that they would take my name off that list of banned individuals, joined with the communists, the so-called Labour Party, and kept me on a list with murderers and terrorists, which is a shocking thing to think that the vermin in the media won't even cover the story. But I'm not here to play victim. I'm a big man. I realize I got myself into trouble by speaking the truth to power, and I have to dig myself out of the hole, and I want to thank all of you who have and continue to contribute to the legal fund. Without you, I would have been buried a long time ago. But thankfully, I have a fund, and I'm fighting them, and I haven't given up. I want you to know that. But there are other fights to be had, both domestic and foreign. And the fact of the matter is, you're not fighting them. When have you last fought over any of these issues? When have you last called a radio show and heard a discussion about abortion, about animal rights, family values? Why, that went out with Newt Gingrich. Death penalty? When have you last talked about the death penalty? When have you last talked about the drug war and the drug war's failures? When have you last talked about flag burning, about feminism, about the media bias in the U.S.? Well, we do that on a fairly regular basis. We know what that is. Have you last heard anyone fighting over multiculturalism and how it's devastated the dominant culture in the society and how multiculturalism is a code word for attacking whitey? When have you last heard anyone arguing over euthanasia? You've given up on that. When they put your grandmother to sleep because they don't have the money to take care of her, you'll say, oh, well, I guess it's better that way. Then there's more money in the Obamacare system for the drug addict. When have you last heard anyone arguing about breaking churches off breaking crosses off war memorials, which the communists do? Have you recently discussed abstinence as opposed to sexual mania? Have you recently heard a discussion or an argument over stem cell research? No. since Obama, the Marxist, has come to power, they have assumed they won all of these battles. And with the check-pants Republicans running the other side, they have won on all of these issues. So I'm trying to tell you why I'm so agitated over Obama continuing to not only degrade and denigrate the United States of America, but the language itself, the way all Marxists work. I've told you what they do. They destroy the culture, first from within and then from without. But he glorifies it, and he glories in his decimation of everything decent about our society, doesn't he? He literally takes a certain, you can almost taste the pleasure he gets in inviting an illiterate gutter rat to the White House. He has tremendous pleasure in what he is doing. And there's not a word coming out of the media on this. You may hear it here and there on talk radio. I think it's a pretty big topic on talk radio, what he did by calling this garbage poetry when we know it isn't poetry. And yet he invited these failures from the universities and from the streets and from the record companies, obviously in order to appease and appeal to certain base levels of the electorate. But some of them actually had the nerve to compare rap music to Shakespeare. I doubt that they've ever read Shakespeare. I don't think they could quote anything from Shakespeare. But listen to clip 24 when you will hear one of these illiterates invited onto the Fixed News Network in 24.
So I think you can pull out lyrics from Shakespeare, and they would be offensive. You know, under these standards.
See the word offensive? That's a radical left-wing word for anything that they find objectionable. They call it offensive. It offends them. This is not about offensive lyrics. You see, she misses the point on purpose. The entire structure of rap music is offensive. It's not that all of Shakespeare is offensive. Sure, you can pull a word out here and there and it might be offensive, but it's not about Shakespeare's literacy that we're arguing. We're arguing about the illiteracy of the individuals that the Obamas invited into our White House and debased it by inviting these individuals into the White House and calling it poetry. Of course, that would take a little degree of thought to come up with what I just said. And so, sure, hip-hop may reflect the current situation in urban ghettos. So, big deal. Does that make it poetry? No. It makes it a political statement, not poetry. But this is what the radical vermin on the left have done to our universities over the last 20 years. They have destroyed the English language itself. They have let people who they let into the universities who never qualified to even be there in the first place. They rigged up the exams. They destroyed standards. They brought in people who could never qualify to be in a university for many different reasons. And they said, now you're a student. So when the student couldn't keep up with the class, they lowered the common denominator down to the level of the student. And suddenly they gave the student the ammunition by saying, oh, do you find it offensive that they're forcing you to read Shakespeare, a white male? Well, why don't you tell them how you see the world in your own words? The next thing you know, you wake up, click, click. There is the President of the United States, himself a product of all of this, by the way, ushered along every step of the way because of the political expediency of the radical left and the acquiescence of all those who knew better. And there we now see what he does when he's in the White House. He degrades and denigrates it on a daily basis. Savage.